Serious, what's a secret you will take to the grave but don't mind telling on the internet? My father burned down my childhood home for the insurance money. He took me along as his alibi, so I could verify he wasn't anywhere near it when it happened. I was 13 years old. I remember crying so hard knowing my clothes, books, photos, all of it would be destroyed. I wasn't allowed to save anything because he told me it would have been too suspicious. I found out years later he blamed it on me, telling the fire chief plus friends and family the fire had started because I must have been secretly smoking in my bedroom. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I feel for you. Lesser than what happened to you. But my mom used to steal my grandfather's painkillers while he was dying of cancer, and I found out years later that the reason my whole extended family still hates me is because she told them I was the one doing it. Parents suck. Edit, I've literally never gotten an award for anything. Thank you for the medals. My mother is cheating on my father and my father is cheating on my mother. They both know I know this but made me promise not to tell the other parent. Parents are ducked up sometimes. Maybe they should just become swingers. It may save their relationship. Plus I know plenty of people who are swingers and live kick as lives. Edit, one of my top comments is encouraging Muslims to become swingers. Reddit is a weird place sometimes. Edit 2, my top comment is officially about encouraging Muslims to become swingers. I love this place. Also, thanks for the medals, kind strangers. That my dad paid my mom $1,500 for full custody of my youngest sibling. Not only would this be a massive blow to my sibling, but my dad remarried quite quickly and the new wife is the very definition of an evil stepmom. If my sibling knew that our mom gave her up for such a small sum of money and the trade-off was 5+ years of abuse, she would be destroyed. My dad remarried with an evil stepmom. It's hard to try being with my beloved dad and being away from my evil stepmom. Luckily I lived 9/5 with my mom and dad, so I say my dad for 5 days every 9 days. But still with my stepmom around. My father-in-law died of a heart attack at a strip club. The cop told my wife and mother-in-law that it was a bar. They assumed it was a sports bar. My brother-in-law and I had to pick up the car from said strip club. We both pledged to never tell the rest of the family. Edit, God. I hate that this is my most popular post. My brother-in-law didn't have a driver's license. I was only there as the person who could drive the car back to their home. He was ultimately responsible for death certificates, probate or any other legal proceedings after. It's not my ducking business whether or not I should have told his mother and sister anything about how his father died. However, my mother-in-law is super religious and it would have just made her sad. Good man. So my grandfather had a hand in making one of the World Series trophies back in the day. He never got any credit. But we have photos and parts from his prototype. When I was a teen I added what I knew to Wikipedia, since why not, although I believe it's gone now. But funny story, I ended up being quoted in newspapers all over the country. Proceed to a few years later I get a call from my mom who's almost in tears of joy. She found that wiki page and was freaking out. She was so happy he finally got credit. She ended up making really fancy shadow boxes of the wiki page printed out. Copies of the photos and other baseball stuff. She made one for each of her siblings. I've had to just bite my tongue every time I go over there and see this thing hanging prominently in the living room. I ended up being quoted in newspapers all over the country. It sounds like he did get the credit he deserved. Sometimes we have to speak up for those who won't speak up for themselves. Once when I was 13 I went a week and a half without pooping. I was on a camping trip and something must have happened with the drinking water, my digestion. Took laxatives. Nothing worked. My stomach was killing me but nothing would come out. Then one evening after dinner, I felt it coming. I knew this was it. I bolted for the bathhouse, mentally preparing for the epic event. When I finally waddled in, the stalls were all occupied. At this point I'm freaking out. I'm literally going to sheet my pants and in the woods with no means of cleaning. I waddle to the private shower attached to the bathrooms and my desperate mind starts solving problems like I'm Bradley Cooper in Limitless. Initially I think to just sheet on the shower drain and waffle stomp it through. But I was not going to be that guy who ruined the nicest shower in the woods for everyone. Like a bolt of lightning I knew what I had to do. So I pooped in the only piece of clothing I could spare, my sock. Obviously my stomach was doing better now and I was hugely relieved. I brought the poop sock to the dumpster nearby and one of my friends saw me on the way. Before I could dispose of the poop sock, he strikes up a conversation and starts asking questions about what I'm doing. Internally I'm panicking. The best excuse I could come up with was that I found a sock in the shower stuffed with mud, so I thought it best to throw it away. My friend affirms how good of a guy the first am for doing that. I throw the poop sock into the dumpster and my problems are finally over. Mud in a sock is a ridiculous story, but there's absolutely no way he could have guessed that the real situation was much more bizarre. I've never told a soul about this until now. Never will again. Edit, thanks for the gold and silver. When I was a kid I used to sheet in a tire in the garden because I was scared of getting locked in the toilet. I sharted on a New Year's party bus a few years ago. I thought it was just a fart, but it was a small shotgun blast of fluid. I stayed calm, and threw away my undies at the next bar. Luckily there was little or no sheet on the inside of my jeans and I was able to continue the night with no one aware of my poop crime. That happened to me on Halloween a few years ago. I drank 6 Angry Orchards and sharted in my thong. I just calmly walked into the bathroom and tore the side seams of the underwear so I could take them off and throw them away without having to remove my fishnets. No one was the wiser. When I was an awkward tween, my brothers and I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. We had been raised by my grandparents since we were little kids. And even after my dad remarried. He and my stepmom both worked graveyard shift, so we would spend the night at my grandparents' house while my parents were at work. One day, my grandmother informed me that it was my grandfather's birthday and suggested that I wish him a happy birthday. He was downstairs in the living room sitting on the sofa. And I went up to him and gave him a big hug around the neck and said, "Happy birthday, Grandpa." It was kind of difficult to hug a person sitting down, so I ended up kneeling on the sofa between his legs rather than trying to hug him from a standing position. He was quite happy and gave me a hug back. When I pulled back from the hug, he held me in his arms and gave me a big smile. And then he put his tongue in my mouth. Sometimes when I was a little kid we would kiss other family members on the mouth. But those were chaste pecks on the lips. I could tell immediately that this was different. His tongue was on my teeth. It lasted only for a moment and I was grossed out and confused when I pulled away. At that moment my grandmother walked into the living room. I turned my head to look at her, my hands were still on my grandpa's shoulders. She seemed really happy that I had wished my grandfather a happy birthday like a good little kid. I gave him a final quick hug and scrambled out of the room. For the rest of my tween and teen years, I was always careful not to be alone in the same room with my grandfather. He passed away during my 20s. A good decade ahead of his time due to lifestyle-induced health issues. And my family chose me to speak at his funeral. I had really complicated feelings about it because I did love him. My grandma and grandpa raised me. After all. Also, my grandfather was the rock of the family, and after he passed away, the 3 branches, my dad and our family, plus his siblings and their families, gradually grew apart. And nothing was ever the same between us again. We don't even spend Christmas all together anymore. I've never told anyone in my family about it because I couldn't break my grandmother's heart. She's survived her husband 10 years and still talks to and about him every day and visits his grave multiple times a week. So, thanks for listening to my story, Reddit. Nice to get that off my chest. My first car accident back in high school was not because I swerved to miss a deer like I told my dad and the police. I actually tried to pull the emergency brake and do a 180 while going 50 miles per hour downhill. Had I gone off the other side of the road I would have gone down a 50-foot hill and into the river. That was the last time I ever tried anything like that. There just so happened to be deer tracks in the mud near the ditch where I ended up. I avoided a ticket and my dad paid to fix my car. I have never told him the truth in the 15+ years since. I crashed my first car because I fell asleep at the wheel on my way to my girlfriend's house at the time. Literally like 2 seconds. Overcorrected. Spun across the highway. Ended up in a ditch. Nothing was hurt or broken except my car. So that was lucky. And I told my mom I swerved to miss hitting a dog. It seemed less embarrassing than the truth. Edit, I can't believe my highest upvoted comment on Reddit is about how I almost died. I agreed to a first date with someone to make him stop crying. 6 years later we're happily engaged and doing great. I don't know how well he remembers that. But I'm not bringing it up. Has he stopped crying yet? My dad cheated on my mom and invited the person over when I was 9. She was a severely overweight woman and my dad is also quite overweight. My parents were fighting but trying to work things out. They slept in separate rooms at this point. Earlier that day I had jumped on his bed and broke the board supporting it on the bed frame. I wasn't allowed to do this and always got in trouble for this reason. My mom smelled the fact that my dad had company because she smoked. In my house. She asked if I jumped on the bed. I said no. I feared I'd get in trouble. I was surprised there was no follow-up trying to prove my guilt. Years later I remember why she asked and realized my lie basically incriminated him to ducking her. I'm sure he did, but that got him kicked out of my house. TLDR, I broke the damn bed. Only I know that my mother-in-law killed her dog by sitting on it. I was graped with an implement in the youth room of my childhood church by my 2 best friends at the time. We were basically alone in the building at the time. One did it. And the other held me down. They thought it was a joke, funny. Even once I started screaming. One of them had a moment of clarity and I suppose realized that what they were doing was wrong. And made the other person stop. And they sat there with me for a few minutes until I'd calmed down. Once I regained myself enough to stand, I racked one of them between the legs with a pool cue. Their parents were waiting in the parking lot. And they were going to call the cops on me until my friend confessed what they'd done to their parents. I was pressured into silence by the pastor at the parents' behest. I've told people, so I guess it's not technically a secret. But nobody's believed me because I'm a big guy. And always have been. The last person I tried to talk to about it actually smacked me in the face. So I guess I'll be dying with this one. Edit, a word. Who the duck would smack you in the face for sharing something like that? The fact I'm bisexual. Hello from Russia. I forget how much we take for granted in America. As a teenager, I had cancer multiple times and nearly died a lot. At one point, I spent several weeks in intensive care and survived despite no doctor thinking that I possibly could live. More than 20 years later, everyone I know still comments on how I survived purely on will to live. I actually spent every moment in that hospital bed in absolute agony. Desperately wanting to die. *edit. Thank you to the kind folks for my first Reddit awards and for all of the kind words. I'm healthy now and doing well. Damn. I'm happy you made it out and I understand you don't want to disappoint them now. But you should with a very serious face tell them to stop. That's not a comment I'd like to hear. Especially when reality was that different. You know those stories about girls in the 70s who went to live with an aunt for a year during high school? I did that. In 2008. I was a very naive teenager with irregular periods. And my friend thought it would be absolutely hilarious to buy those cheap pregnancy tests at Walmart and see what happened. We laughed the whole time. Until one of them was positive. We couldn't remember which was which, so we got 2 more and turns out it was mine. That was when it dawned on me that I had had 6. My school did not offer any kind of sex education. And my parents were useless in that regard. I panicked and swore my friend to secrecy. Basically put it out of my mind until my pants didn't fit anymore. I was always close with one of my older cousins and we were talking on the phone one night when she asked how school was going and I just dumped all of it on her. She came up with the perfect plan. It was already April and when I'd finally gotten the courage to go to Planned Parenthood they'd told me I was due in August. So my cousin called my mom saying there was this amazing summer music program in her town that I just had to attend. And that I could stay with her the whole time. My mom thought it was great and the day after school ended I got on a plane to San Francisco. I stayed with my cousin. She went to all of my appointments with me. And she helped me find a social worker and eventually my daughter's parents. When I arrived back home before my junior year of high school started, my mom asked me how my summer was without really caring and then remarked that I must have lost a few pounds. My cousin died in 2012 in a car accident. And no one else knew apart from that one friend. The doctors I saw in Oakland. And the people involved in the adoption. I get a photo and a letter about the child once a year. And I send money for her college and a card for her birthday every year. When she turns 16, her parents are allowed to give her the cards if she wants them. But they are not permitted to pass any contact information along. I have no interest in meeting her or getting to know her personally. I know she's safe and comfortable and that's all I want. I will die before I tell anyone about her. And if my friend were to spill the beans I would deny it.